Welcome to episode number 4 of The Language of Ahava. And this title today is my favorite. It is Monster Big Feelings. Because as you can see, or you will hear shortly, we have a very, very, very special guest today. But I'm here. I'm Karen Deerwester. I'm the teacher part of the podcast. And with me is...
I'm David Steinhardt. I'm a senior rabbi at B'nai Torah and happy to be doing this with Karen week after week. And I'm very happy to be able to introduce special guests that we have today. I'd like to introduce everybody to Avi Steinhardt. Avi's a psychotherapist in Brooklyn, and he's here with his co-host, and that's Louis the Monster. So
hello,
Avi.
Hello, people.
Hey, Louis, I am your number one fan.
I think I knew that. Thank you, Karen. It's such an honor to be here. And thank you, Rabbi. Oh, Rabbi, go on, please. We interrupted.
I just want to say, Avi and Louis have done some very special work over the last more than a year and a half. And Avi and Louis, you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing?
Yeah, we've since the pandemic started about a year and a half ago, Louis and I have been making videos, usually a couple times a week. And we try to keep up with things that have been going on. And, well, we enter into people's confusion. And sometimes we have different responses to the things going on over here. Sometimes we look to poetry or comedy or music or old stories. And we're called Monster Insight. And as you can hear, it's hard to explain.
Well, what I want to say, welcome, guys, welcome. What I know is that I have been following Monster Insight since the beginning of COVID, and you both have been holding space for me. You have been holding space for my anger, my frustration, my fear, my overwhelm, and you can shift me in a different direction, or you can allow me to feel even bigger what I'm feeling. But Rabbi and I have been talking, getting ready for Rosh Hashanah, like where we are, how we are, and who we are. And that just seemed like a perfect opening for you guys, because we're talking about self-reflection. And without being offensive, I'm calling it monster big feelings, because that's what's going on in my world for the last year. And it's explosive feelings. It is off the rails feelings. And both from a monster expertise and a psychotherapist expertise, help us with we'll have Rabbi help with the Rosh Hashanah maybe, but help us guys orient to these big, sorry to say, monster feelings.
Don't be sorry at all. I don't take any offense to that, do I? Do we? Not at all, no. I mean, some people mean things when they say monster, but qualifying feelings, I get it. You know, monster, it comes from the old Latin, and the word it comes from is moner. And moner means something like omen or warning. So in fact, feelings are often just like monsters in that way. You know, it's people that tend to then take monsters and totally demonize them. And guess what? Light bulb moment, they do that with feelings too.
Okay, I get it even more than I did when you first called it Monster Insights. Rabbi?
So we're approaching Rosh Hashanah, and there are many different levels to that day. But certainly one of them is this notion that we're standing before an awesome power, bigger than any one of us, with the realization that we don't know what the year ahead is going to bring. My sense is the last couple of years have brought that home very clearly to us, this great uncertainty. You know, in Rosh Hashanah liturgy, it says there's a book that's opened up, and in it's written who shall live and who shall die. And none of us can know that. How do you walk people through uncertainty? What do you do? Maybe Avi, you can start with this as a psychotherapist, this great uncertainty that we're living with.
Yeah, what do you do?
I'm leaning in.
Well, I think that, you know, panic happens when we think that we shouldn't be uncertain. That's like with feelings too. That's right. So that we really become problematic and things become more chaotic when we imagine that it should be otherwise. So if I'm trying to walk someone through uncertainty, often a lot of energy and attention is going to get pulled in the direction of me continuing to let that person know that it's perfectly natural and healthy to be uncertain at a time like this, and that it might even be called for. Yeah, called for.
So part of this podcast, you may not know this yet because it's just been launching, is that it's a rabbi and a teacher walk into a podcast for parents of young children.
Full
So
confession, I'm not even sure what a podcast is.
it's just a conversation. But as you talk about walking someone into uncertainty, I want to ask how we do this for children. And I know that Rabbi Steinhardt has a really personal question, perspective to ask you.
Well, I think that Avi, my sense is, oh, and by the way, I don't know if we said this, but Avi's my son. That's the similarities in name. I think that you've learned a lot and expressed a lot through Louis over the last few years. But I also know that you have a 4-year-old daughter, Aya. What has Aya taught you about the emotional expressions of very young children? By the way, Aya just turned 4.
Yeah, that's a good question, Rabbi. That is a good question, and I don't think that I could cover what she's taught me in one podcast episode. The first thing that just came to mind, though, when it comes to those feelings is, like with so many things, the wild is dangerous and necessary, both in nature and in ourselves. We need wild energy to be creative, to be adaptive, sometimes to really enter in to realms we don't understand. And we also know that those same areas can be perilous and dangerous. And I think that my child is a reminder of how close those things live together and how inexpert you always feel as a parent to try to walk that line with them, to allow the wild to be, because it's necessary. Like, we need the wild to thrive, for instance, in our world, for things ecologically to hold together. We can't keep taming it all to feel safer. Right. That's also with other people, by the way, and the limited control we have over them. Thank you, Louis. That's a good point. Yeah, I wanted to mention that. And, you know, as a parent, like I said before, with regard to uncertainty, you know, we react to our kids the worst when we think we are supposed to feel powerful. And when we forget that the actual true experience is powerlessness. And when we can act from that place, then we might be a little more artful in helping keep things safe enough. Right,
okay.
right.
So the
Sorry.
artfulness is that, because I'm nodding with you for every parent that's listening, you walk that tightrope every day, validating, honoring, hearing, allowing them to be explosive, to reveal what they can't express calmly, patiently, logically, rationally, and even that they still live in all the contradictions that we pretend are neatly consistent. And you have to keep them safe. And you
not only that, but you don't want your household to, well, look, we know from Carl Jung that growth is differentiation. So this defiance and pushback is necessary and healthy. But it's not just keeping them physically safe. It's also, how do we keep this from becoming an environment
of conflict all the time?
Right.
How can we allow all this pushback, but still have some peace and harmony between us? Oh, that's tricky, huh?
Okay, we've gotten to the how. We've gotten
Yeah.
to the how. So we're talking about big monster feelings. We want everyone to be fearless and courageous when we feel them in ourselves or when we see them in the people we love or even strangers. How can we respond? Both Mike in a moment in a family, or for Rabbi for a new year as we set a focus for ourselves going forward.
Can I add something here? And this is kind of like a generational, transitional perspective or observation. Because I remember as a little kid, I specifically remember there were times where my mother or father would say to me, "Don't be sad," or "Don't be angry." And it would try to like realign me emotionally and cause a kind of a repression of those emotions. I remember then later as a father, trying to allow Avi and the kids, my other kids, to be able to express those feelings and how uncomfortable they made me. And now I watch Avi and Gabriel and Noah as parents, and they are freer than I was. And they are able to allow their kids to give voice to their feelings. And Avi once taught me something, probably from a Mr. Rogers episode that I saw but didn't remember about feelings. Avi, can you recall what Mr. Rogers said about feelings?
Well, I think you might be referring to when he actually presented before the Congress and had to make a defense
That's
against
right.
public television because they were threatening to defund them. And he said, I remember the quote pretty well. He said, "I strongly believe that if we can just teach children that feelings are mentionable and manageable, then we will have done a great service for mental health in this country." And that's still essentially countercultural. That's still radical, I think, all these years later. And people take it for granted and they think of Mr. Rogers as being cliche. But what he's suggesting is still not what you really see out there in the mainstream.
Explain.
People still want to be in control, and people still want to be able to interpret and get around these things in themselves, and their kids represent their own lack of power. They're the poet David White said they are outer emblems of our own inner raw sense of powerlessness.
Truth.
And there's not many of us, and I might be an exception here, that were given any kind of example of how you can be an adult and be in touch with those kinds of feelings.
Well, let me give you back a word that Rabbi used about himself. He said, "I felt discomfort when my children were in these expressive moments."
Yes.
I don't believe that has changed at all. I think when you see your children falling apart, melting down, running into walls, ceilings, floors, the discomfort is overwhelming. So there's one little how. What do you do first with discomfort?
With my own, as a parent?
As a parent.
Oh, this is a good one too. By the way, you are fantastic. I think acknowledging it is always, that's what I was gonna say. You always have to acknowledge it first. And sometimes we talk about how the only timeouts that we believe in are the ones that the parent needs.
Right.
And that's a real thing. You can know that maybe you wish you were more patient right now, but if you're not, you better go in the other room and blow some air out the window.
I think it's as Louis said, this idea of acknowledgement. I think when we see our kid acting out, angry, banging their head against the wall, throwing something, whatever, I do think that the parent needs to say to the child, I see how angry you are. Why are you so angry? Or let's see, or figure out another way to express that that's not harmful to the kid or the environment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. I mean, I wouldn't always go for the why, because the kid, of course, can't always answer that. But I do think that redirecting, and sometimes the trick, the artfulness there is understanding that what they need to do is push back. So if you're only giving them, if you give them all the suggestions of how to be safe, well, they're not going to take any of them. You've got to leave some open for them to choose. Because defiance is the name of the game in some of those moments. And the tricky balance also of allowing them to be these things and getting them to behave in a society. Not only that, but a society with rules that are popping up by the week.
Yep.
That's such a big, there's a whole nother podcast, is how do you teach those choices? How do you as a family select? Here's where we are, here's where our values are, here's where our priorities are, here's where our disconnects have to be in order, as you had said before, the monster feelings are going to create chaos. So the phrase that I use, and it's another cliche, but it's like sanity first. Like, don't.
Yeah.
But if we're what will help our family function right here, right now,
Right.
and separate that out from all those other pressures.
And that often does not look like perfection. That's right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Rabbi, is there a universal close for Rosh Hashanah? Go ahead.
I was going to say one other thing just with the how, because we talked about the how in the moment of difficulty, and we talked about the how with, responding to your own reactions to the thing as a parent, right? But we didn't talk about holistically, and I know we're short on time, but I did want to say creating opportunities for wildness can help. And, checking yourself with how much you can tolerate of dance time, of silly time. Because I'll tell you a secret, parents, it gets annoying. But if you can tolerate more of it and allow more there might be less sometimes on the other end. So that's just a couple thoughts.
And so the
yeah.
teacher in me, let me just throw out, because I'm here to say the play matters. And if you don't have a low tolerance for joining your children's play, bring them to yours. And the thing that I know about watching Louie and Aya is they share nature, they share wonder, they share the bigness of the world, as you do as a parent as well, as a family. So a lot, knowing that those resets that bring us back to wholeness, and maybe that's part of the how, is that yes, make sure you have routines that work, make sure you have space in your days for all of the fallout, but look for those things that create wholeness in yourself, in your family, in your children, in your pets, in our world, which is
I just wanted to say quickly that, just for the record, that, I've been running a mental health practice from home since the pandemic started, in a 700 square foot apartment with a really powerful kid. And we have not achieved anything close to balance. But in our awareness of the imbalance, we somehow keep figuring out ways to respond to it. Well, that's good, Avi. That was good.
It's very good. Thanks, Louie.
What you don't know, Karen, well, you may know from seeing their pictures, but they also have a large dog. And Avi, you should be very happy that your dog doesn't bark a lot, because I've been getting notes from people who are reflecting on their year, and they're talking about just when they have that most important Zoom meeting, the kid starts crying, the kettle starts screaming, and the dog starts barking. So at least you've got one of those taken care of.
We have a kid that is wild and a dog that is not.
Yeah.
May it be a blessed wild new year for all of us.
Oh yeah.
So I'll
Shana
close with
Tova,
one
love ya.
little metaphor from Rosh Hashanah, and that is, we speak about all of these things, but a lot of what we speak about is really outside of the world of language, and it enters into a more spirited, soulful world, and a world without the words. And maybe the essence of the Rosh Hashanah service is the blowing of the shofar. And so the blowing of the shofar, is an expression of crying for the sadness of this world and the uncertainty, and laughing because there still is joy to be found. And it's also an expression of hope that will come together confronting this world, this uncertain world this year. Thanks for joining us, Avi and Louis. It's been really fun for me to be able to be a part of you. I've so admired your work, and it makes me very proud. I don't know what my relationship is with you, Louis, but as Avi's father, for sure. And say hi to Aya when you get done, okay?
Of course. I love
And
that kid.
I look forward to a new year with this podcast, with Rabbi Steinhardt and with Avi and Louis. It is Monster Insight. He's on Instagram. He's on Facebook. He's everywhere. And you really will have support, hope, perspective, and a great blue monster by your side through whatever uncertainty is coming in the year ahead. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so
Shana-
much for having us.
Thanks.
You're the best.
Shana
Thank you.
Tova.
Bye-bye.
Bye.